Two quarterbacks. Two Hall of Famers. One team. In the 1980s and 90s, the San Francisco 49ers weren't just great, they were the gold standard of greatness in the NFL. Precision offense, star-studded rosters, and a trophy case that overflowed with Lombardi Trophies. But behind the highlights, behind the glory, and behind all that sparkling red and gold, was tension. A quarterback controversy unlike anything the NFL had ever seen. This is the story of Joe Montana and Steve Young, two legends whose rivalry didn't just split a locker room, it redefined an entire era of football. Their beef didn't destroy the 49ers. It created a dynasty. Part 1, The Golden Boy, Joe Montana's Rise. Let's rewind to 1979. The 49ers were a struggling franchise, desperate for a savior. And in the third round of the NFL draft, they found a kid from Notre Dame named Joe Montana. At first, Montana wasn't pegged as a superstar. He wasn't the biggest, he didn't have the strongest arm. But what he did have was ice in his veins. That uncanny ability to stay calm when everything else was falling apart. By 1981, he led San Francisco to the NFC Championship game. And then came the play that would change NFL history forever. The catch. Joe rolls right, under pressure, and lofts the ball to Dwight Clark in the back of the end zone. Clark makes the fingertip grab, the stadium erupts, and just like that, Joe Montana wasn't just a quarterback anymore. He was Joe Cool. Super Bowl XXIX. Win. Super Bowl XIX. Win. Super Bowl XXIII. Win. Super Bowl XXIV. Win. Montana was flawless. For Super Bowls, for wins, 3 Super Bowl MVPs. By the late 80s, he wasn't just the face of the 49ers. He was the face of the entire NFL. Audience engagement. Here's a question. Do you think Montana's calm, surgical style would still dominate in today's high-octane NFL? Or would defenses figure him out? Let me know in the comments. Part 2. Enter the lefty, Steve Young's arrival. While Montana was busy building his legacy, another quarterback was on a very different path. Steve Young. A dual-threat quarterback before. Dual threat was even a term. Left-handed, fast, and fearless. But Steve's start wasn't glamorous. Drafted into the USFL, then signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he struggled on a team that was, frankly, terrible. His record? A brutal 3-16 as a starter. Analysts wrote him off as a bust. But then came Bill Walsh, the genius architect of the West Coast offense. Walsh believed Young wasn't a bust. He was a weapon. So in 1987, the 49ers traded for him. Now, imagine this, you're Steve Young. You've been handed a second chance, and suddenly you're wearing the same uniform as Joe Montana. The guy with 4 Super Bowl rings. The guy who's basically a living legend. How do you compete with that? Part 3, Seeds of Rivalry. At first, Young was just a backup. Montana was untouchable. But then, injuries. Joe took hit after hit, missing significant time in the late 80s. And every time he went down, Young stepped in, and sometimes he didn't just fill in. He shined. Fans started whispering. Some said, Montana's still the man. Others said, Young is the future. Even in the locker room, players were divided. Veteran receivers like Jerry Rice respected Montana's leadership but were impressed by Young's mobility and explosiveness. Little-known anecdote, in practice, Montana and Young would compete in throwing drills. Not because they had to, but because neither wanted to lose to the other. Teammates said the tension was palpable. And of course, the media poured gasoline on the fire. Headlines screamed, Montana or Young, who should start? Is Montana's time up? The controversy was born. Part 4. The height of the beef. Fast forward to the early 90s. Montana was injured again. Young became the starter. And he was good, really good. He ran the offense, broke rushing records for a quarterback, and started racking up MVP numbers. But there was one problem. He wasn't Joe Montana. The fans still loved Joe. The legend. the myth. Joe Cool. Every mistake Young made was magnified. Every interception? Montana wouldn't have done that. Every playoff stumble? Montana would have won. Can you imagine the pressure? Living in the shadow of a man many called the greatest quarterback of all time? Audience engagement. Here's something to think about. Would you rather be the guy who replaces a legend, or the guy who replaces the guy who replaced the legend? Which is tougher? Part 5. The Breaking Point. By 1993, Montana was healthy again. And now George Seifert, who had replaced Bill Walsh as head coach, had an impossible decision: start Montana, or stick with Young? Seifert chose Young. And that was it. Montana was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. For 49ers fans, it was like the end of an era. The man who had brought them 4 Super Bowls was leaving. But for Young, it was finally his chance. No more shadow. No more controversy. The team was his. Or was it? Part 6. The monkey on his back. Young dominated statistically. He won MVPs, shattered records, and turned the 49ers into an offensive juggernaut. But there was always the criticism. Yeah, but can he win the big one? Every playoff loss reopened the Montana versus Young debate. Every failure was compared to Montana's perfection. And then, 1994. Super Bowl XXIX. 49ers versus Chargers. Steve Young put on one of the greatest performances in NFL history, 6 touchdown passes. A Super Bowl record that still stands. As confetti rained down, Young finally screamed, "Someone take the monkey off my back!" At last, he wasn't just Steve Young, the guy who followed Joe Montana. He was Steve Young, Super Bowl champion. Part 7. The Legacy of the Rivalry. So who was better? Montana or Young? The debate still rages today. Montana, 4 rings, undefeated in Super Bowls, the ultimate clutch performer. Young, better stats, more athletic, ahead of his time as a running quarterback. But here's the truth: without their rivalry, without that beef, without the constant push and pull, the 49ers dynasty may never have lasted as long as it did. Montana set the standard. Young pushed the standard further. Together, even if they couldn't coexist, they elevated San Francisco into something legendary. And years later, both men admitted it: the rivalry was tough, uncomfortable, even painful. But it made them better. It made them legends. OUTRO. At the end of the day, the 49ers had more than just a dynasty. They had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, back-to-back. 2 men, locked in rivalry, who defined an era of football. Because sometimes, greatness isn't born out of harmony. Sometimes, it's forged in fire. Montage: Montana's. The catch. Young's 6 TD Super Bowl, confetti falling, split screen of both QBs in their prime. And that's the story of how a quarterback controversy, how one of the fiercest beefs in NFL history, created a dynasty the league had never seen before. Fire call to action. So, who do you think was the better quarterback, Joe Montana or Steve Young? Drop your pick in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more legendary sports stories.